Hello, welcome back. So today we are going to look at doing better line art. So how to tackle line art, how to think about compartmentalizing and the hierarchy in line art, all those good things. So line art can be a really crucial step in just refining and resolving a design. So just making sure that like all the junctions are working properly, that all the elements are separated properly, and that the whole design is really legible. And in this case, you can see what I have up on screen right now is a rough sketch of a pretty complex scene. So there's a lot of elements going on. There's this pretty complex like mech robot, and then we have background elements, and I want to do some VFX, and it's like a full kind of almost like a comic panel, but lots of stuff going on, and you can see there's just a lot of scribbles. So stuff isn't very well resolved. So you can kind of see like a car, some sort of like telephone pole that I don't really know. I'm gonna have to use some reference to find out how that works to make it believable. We have another car here and some stuff in the foreground, and you can see a lot of the details in the mech guy are pretty scribbly here. So I'm indicating detail, but I haven't resolved everything yet. So the important thing to get right in your sketch is to make sure that your proportions are right, and that your perspective is right, and that your main ideas are pretty clear. So I have a good idea how I want to separate stuff. So you can see like, I have a panel here for the top of the hand, and then we have like our different panels and tubes and hinges and stuff in the forearms. So it's important to have this resolved, because when it comes to line art, it's more of like just executing step by step and kind of resolving things locally, and less designing. You don't want to think about designing too much, but rather just like refinement and resolving. So the first thing we're going to do is break down the primary shapes. So I'm just going to focus on the mech guy for now, and we'll tackle the background towards the end. But I just want to make sure that I can break up the whole drawing into the primary, like the big elements, just to separate them and make sure that they're properly delineated. So what I'll do is, so this sketch is colorized, and I can just drop the opacity on it, something like 30-40%. And then the kind of brush that I'm going to use, you can use an ink brush or a pencil or whatever, but I like my line art to be pretty smooth, so that when I come to shade, the way I shade stuff is also kind of like smooth and stuff. So I want it to be integrated properly. So I'm just going to use the same brush that I use to shade, which is kind of this, I'm going to use this kind of like soft ellipse brush, and this kind of looks like a pencil when you scale it way down. And I want my line art for this particular painting or drawing, I want to show scale and how big this thing is. So I'm going to keep my line art pretty small, so pretty thin, and go into detail, and that'll also just help me explain hierarchy and stuff, because it's going to be extra important. So let's go with something like, something like 35, 30. Let's do 30. I can always bulk up, like double my layer if it's not strong enough. And now I'm just gonna go around like the silhouette of all the primary shapes and just make sure that they're nice and defined. So I'm gonna jump into time lapse for this part, but here we go. So zoom out a bit. I also want to say, just before I jump into the time lapse, it's important not to get like too zoomed in, especially in the beginning. You want to be zoomed in enough that you have control over your line, but not too much, because that can actually affect the quality of your line. Like if you're drawing here and you're doing sort of like chicken scratchy lines like this, it can give less of a nice result than if you're zoomed out and you're using like broad smooth strokes. So take your time, but don't zoom in too much at this stage. So as this time lapse is going on, I'm just going to take the opportunity to plug my my new course. So the fall session for my masterclass and mentorship program is now available to register. I just posted a quick video about that a couple days ago. So if you go over to christophyoung.com, you can visit the masterclass website and read up about it. So this is a 12-week intensive program for character designers and illustrators, where I cover everything from the fundamentals to anatomy to character design and presentation, everything you need basically to equip yourself and kickstart your career as a character concept artist. So yeah, please check it out. I'm really excited about teaching again and helping students, pursue their career goals. So head on over to christophyoung.com and check it out. I will see you guys in September. Now back to the video. Okie dokes. So I think I'm about wrapping up the primary shapes for the line art. So you can see the main breakup is done now. Obviously there's more shapes and stuff happening in the hands and feet, since there's just more mechanical components. And there'll probably be more, I'll add some more detail in the head area too. But now we're going to talk a bit more about adding secondary form. So this is gonna this pass, the second pass. So I'm talking about these kinds of lines here. So the stuff, the internal shapes. I've kind of indicated some of them in my primary pass, but really the pass for your sort of second line weight is going to be like the internal panel lines. We'll talk about some of the contour lines that help define the shape, and then just secondary breakup. So before going into this, you can check and see like from far, like is the design reading properly. Maybe I'll just double the layer so it's a little bit more clear. But I have some big shapes, I have some medium shapes, and then I have some small shapes. But I want to make sure that I leave areas of rest and have more areas of detail, just so that I can create a bit of a narrative with the drawing, and just sort of like just balance and make the viewer focus in certain areas that are like the focal point. So I'll want more detail generally in the hands and around the head, definitely around the head, because that's the main focal point. So I'm just gonna have to add some more detail and resolve this a bit more and make it more interesting. Maybe up here, this could be an interesting focal point around the head area, and then maybe I'll knock back some of the line weight that's in this hand here, since it's the backhand. It's sort of a secondary focal point, but I just want to make sure that the big shapes read first before the smaller secondary shapes. So we'll talk about balancing line weight more at the end, but now I'll do a secondary pass, so a pass on lines that'll really help define the forms and stuff. So I'll just do a quick example here. So here I have this sort of like saddle shape, so I can go in and start like defining, okay, is this more of like a pill shape? So are there round edges like this? And maybe I'll want, something like, okay, maybe there's a cut line here and a cut line, maybe a double one here, and then maybe a sort of seam or something running along the side. And then I can sort of just clean up what's around there. And then around here, this saddle, maybe I have a little bevel here, so I can add a sort of secondary shape there. Maybe I have a bevel sort of running around sort of like this. And I can kind of use a double line to indicate these sort of internal form changes, so corners and stuff, just to show that it's not like a super sharp corner. And I just like to do that by sort of like quickly, running around the shapes and creating nice like tapering internal shapes like this. Kind of helps me define the forms and stuff. I'll drop my I'll drop that back even more, just so I can see this secondary line weight. Maybe around here, have like another little bevel around the side. So this is really just showing the three-dimensionality of the form. And then here I have like a cut line. I can add a little bevel to it. So defining some secondary shapes. Here, so this is more like a more defined shape than what it was before, compared to something like this area here. If I continue, maybe I'll work on another layer, demonstrate this again over here. So I'll have some secondary bevels that I already indicated in my sketch. So here, some form changes. Just turning these into 3D shapes that occupy space and less like planes. Or maybe I've got some hinges or something back here. And a bevel running around. Maybe I simplify this. I like running bevels and stuff around junctions. I find it makes pieces feel like they're holding together nicely. And maybe I taper it this way so that it's like a big area and then a small area. Just adds some more variation. That. Show the top of this plane here. So each shape I'm creating, it kind of creates new flat planes. So if I have like this shape right now is a bit ambiguous, but if I add like a secondary, like a little lip here, taper that down here, adjust for perspective, you can see it kind of creates like a contour line, right? That shows that it's 3D. Same for like this, right? So here we're gonna have another bevel doubling up, just to continue that form all the way around. You can see it's adding a lot of form information to the line art. And then if I need to, I mean, I'm doing it on another layer just to demonstrate, but if it starts to get a bit confusing, like these lines need to be lighter or thinner than the primary shapes, right? Like these big ones. Because if they're the same, like let's say I bump them up to like that, it starts to become difficult to understand where the separation of the main shapes are and what is just describing the form. So I'll keep them really light. And then if I want to, like, if something is becoming a little bit ambiguous, like it's not really clear in the line art, then I can just thicken up, you know, overlaps. So make sure that this shape is coming on top of the ones behind. And I basically just do another like quick pass to define those changes here. So here, just adding a little bit more line weight to make these forms pop, you know, to separate them from one another. That. Okay, so I'm just going to continue around and kind of work on this secondary level of detail. Sometimes I'll refer to my sketch because I already defined them, and then sometimes I'll just ignore it and work over the clean design, the clean lines that I already have. Okay, so we pretty much have our secondary detail pass or secondary line weight pass in. So you can see a lot of the forms are starting to read now properly, and not just as like little 2D planes. The stuff in the back, I don't need to define as much, just because like in proportion to the rest of the character, there it's not like I don't want to put a whole bunch of detail in the back, or stuff that's far away, just because it'll mud up the line art quite a bit. So I'm kind of sticking to the bigger shapes in the back. Like here, I'm not going to go in and detail everything underneath here. I'm just going to kind of, oh wait, I did want to, yeah, I did have these sort of like little tube things here I wanted to add in. Something like that. And we have them up here. So if I have stuff in the foreground, like these details, I can just kind of like indicate them in the back, and you can kind of like make up the rest. Like the viewer can fill in the gaps, you know. It's a lot just about giving the proper impression. So okay, so yeah, we have a lot of the big shapes here, and now I'm gonna kind of go in and detail stuff. So where I see it should be reading, you know, from a distance, the line art should be reading properly now, and then the tertiary detail pass is just about adding little greebles or little mechanical elements or cables or buttons and little joints and stuff, and that'll just add another level of complexity to the design, and it'll also help show a bit of the scale, because the more small details you put on a design, the larger it feels. Where if you just stick to kind of this shape or this level of detail, then it could almost feel like a nicely detailed toy, or like it's, I mean, maybe if you're doing something more stylized, then this can work at this level as it currently is. Something like a Overwatch or like a stylized game in that sort of genre can kind of like, you can kind of stay at this level. But I'm gonna add one last level of detail, just to finish up. So here we go. Okay, so I think we're pretty much done our detail pass here. Can add just a couple final elements. So some details are meant to show the form, so they accentuate the contour. For example, this one here is accentuating the bevel that's happening in the shoulder plate. And then a lot of details are just meant to help junctions, so help connections. So you can see details that are placed, you know, where two objects meet. Often it shows like the manufacturing process behind the piece. So it could be a bolt or like a mechanical connection, and you can see that it just makes the whole thing feel a little bit more believable compared to if you jump back in the video and check the before. One last thing you can do to your line art, and this will just help the overall readability, is you can duplicate it. This is like a trick I learned a while back. And you can use a layer mask. So if you just add a layer mask down here and invert it, you can brush in areas that you want to accentuate. So maybe I need to pick a white color here, but maybe I want to add a bit more contrast like around the head. So I can just kind of brush in, and you can see that I'm adding just a little bit of pop to those areas, and it's just a kind of fast, quick and easy way to add contrast to your line art and to make elements pop without having to, like, you know, to go in and redraw over every line specifically. So you can be a little bit more just efficient and less meticulous. But if I want to make this arm pop out in front of the leg, I just accentuate that bottom portion. So maybe this. Maybe I bring this shoulder pad forward a bit. Here. So I want to accentuate the main overlaps and the sort of bottom portions. Okay, so the chest is overlapping all of this, so I can kind of bring that forward. Bottom of the leg, and then we have the knee here overlapping the foot. Bottom of the foot. See, I'm just really quickly scrubbing over those parts, and it basically doubles the line weight. See here, bottom of the arm, main overlap in the hand. So here it adds just a little bit of contrast to the line art. Just drop this down just a tad. So from far, it is just as readable as the earlier stages, and it just has a little bit more information, so that when I go in and shade, I can pick out all the little details and stuff, and really bring this thing to life. So now that we have this thing done. Let's bring back our background. Wonder if we can create a quick selection here. Tolerance, I'll turn this down to 5. Simple all layers, anti-alias, contiguous. So we can just select our background. I think that's it. Invert it. You can see it's kind of hovering outside the line, so we can go select, modify, contract, maybe 2 pixels. And then we can fill this with a quick color here. Just fill out the silhouette. Just double check around so this area didn't fill. I can just go in with my lasso and fill that in. Check the toes and stuff. It's in these little areas that I always find little mistakes and stuff. There's so many different small shapes. Here, sometimes I don't close my lines. It's really important to close your lines in the silhouette because you don't want to you want it to be a solid form. So here, let's take this, so we can put that under our line art, and we can see how now we've got a proper mech compared to what we had in our sketch. So this mask will also serve as a quick way of making selections for when we shade. When in fact we can just create like a layer mask on top, or a layer on top and use a clipping mask to clip down to the silhouette, so that when we shade it stays within those boundaries, or color or whatever. So it's good to have that pretty early. Okay, for the background, I'm basically gonna go through a similar process. I'm gonna gather some reference first, just to make sure that I have some good reference for buildings, for the lamppost, and even for like, I want to add some broken concrete and stuff in the foreground. So yeah, we'll do that, and we'll get back to doing the line work. And the line work is going to be pretty much the same steps as the mech. We'll just kind of drop the whole thing back in opacity so that the mech kind of pops forward, because it's the main subject matter. So I'll take a small break, and we'll see you back for part 2. Ciao. So we're back. We're going to start working on the background, the line art for the background. And that'll include like the ground that's getting ripped up, and cars and street lamps or traffic lights and buildings and all that stuff. So anything but the mech guy. So we'll put that in a group. We can lock it just so that we make sure we don't mess anything up. And I'll actually darken this just a tad so that I can see where that silhouette ends, and I'll create another layer here above my sketch, and this is where we're gonna draw on the background. So I got some references here just for what I'm gonna use. So we have some building references. A lot of this stuff is from I think this is a lot of shots from Toronto, and we have, yeah, so I have some reference for background buildings, as well as like with the sort of sidewalk and stuff, how that's laid out, some cars, some different ideas that I liked with the buildings and the intersections and stuff. Even the cables that go by, maybe that can add like a little bit of a tertiary element that's getting ripped up. Some background buildings, and I wanted also just to have some buildings with a lot of signage on the side. So we have some shots from Chinatown. We see a lot of like these sort of vertical signage on the side of buildings in that area. So we have some of that. Then we have a couple just traffic lights and things that you wouldn't necessarily think about things I wouldn't think of off the top of my head. So I want to make sure that I create like a believable environment. So you can see when I sketched it in, if I just like bring this over to the side, like I sketched all this stuff from imagination. So I have some of the details that you might see in real life. So like having more than one traffic light on one post, and maybe like the name, like the signage for the name of the street, and then down here we'll have like, you know, some extra signage for either no turn lanes or the name of the other street going in the other direction. But you know, there's some really interesting details that you see when you get reference that you might not think about when you're working from imagination, like how this post connects to the ground. You have the little sign at the bottom to show that you don't want to run your car into the barrier, or the traffic camera on the top of the street light. Even like the way the posts are connected together, and you know, you have some cables, some wiring and stuff. You know, pedestrian signals. All this stuff is it's important to consider having those in your illustrations if you really want to ground your world. So then we have some concrete, talking about grounding things. So some broken concrete. This I'll use like in the bottom here just to show that the street is getting teared up. So I found this nice reference here of something that looks like it's been pushed in by a really, really heavy weight. So maybe I'll use that sort of thing under the feet here. And then I like this one just because there's directionality to that concrete. So maybe I'll turn it vertically and use it sort of under the claws. And then just some cabs that'll be flying around in the background. So I'll have a little cab under here, kind of driving away full speed, and then one here and on the other side just flying up in the air as they get hit. So with that in mind, or with that figured out, I'll just move this to my other monitor and we can get started. What am I going to start with? Let's start with cabs, because they're kind of like secondary. Cabs and traffic lights. Start with that. Okay, so now we have some street lights and cabs that are being messed up. Let's look at the ground. So I'm gonna work on another layer. I like to work on a separate layer while I'm trying new things, and then if I see that it's going in a good direction, or if I'm happy with the result, then I merge it down and just work on one layer. So you can see my layer stack is super simple. You know, Lineart on one layer, mask on the other layer, and then I'll do my shading and color on another one. But I try to keep it pretty much to that. I get really stressed if I have more than like 10 layers in my Photoshop file. So, all with that said, okay, let's work on the ground. You can see in my sketch, I indicated some perspective lines. So those are gonna help me with the directionality of cracks and stuff like that. And then I think I'm just gonna focus on the rubble and the smoke and stuff. The smoke, I think I'll do on top. If I go and shade it, I'll do it in the shading stage, because smoke it's translucent, and you see a lot through it. So I'm gonna have to figure out what's underneath anyways. When you need to kind of like draw through stuff, just figure out what's underneath and figure it out completely, and then you can, you know, layer stuff on top. It's always easier in the long term than like, you know, drawing smoke and mirrors and then kind of like indicating stuff under or behind. Often that just ends up not making any sense. So yeah, I can just, actually, I'm just gonna hide this, work on a different layer, drop this back, and yeah, start sketching in some big shapes for the concrete. I'm gonna focus on big shapes for this first, really, before getting into detail. To try to show the motion and how the concrete's really being ripped apart. So I'm trying to, this is tricky. I'm trying to figure out how the concrete would react to a massive thing like ripping through it. So I'm imagine that it'll kind of like crumple, and so you have like concrete here, but this is all like gravel and stuff under the concrete, and then it kind of like flies off. And in the back, it kind of ripples. So as it would slide back, the concrete would like bunch up, and you know, you'd have like pieces of rubble and stuff to show that there's, you know, power going in. So I'm trying to create sort of like ripple effect, and then I'll resolve the 3D shapes that come on top. I might drop a lot of this back in line weight once I have a more a more concrete sketch. So yeah, we'll see. For now, I'm just kind of like sketching in what I think is going to be the sort of main rhythm. Big chunks flying through. Figuring out the 3D shapes. Also probably do some overlaps. Well, maybe I won't really need any, but okay, so you can see I'm kind of being pretty loose and free. I think I found something that's like a technique. I don't draw a lot of stuff like this, so this is kind of like some new territory. But I think I found something that's working for me. And I think I just need to work at it a little bit, you know, add some different levels of hierarchy and make sure that it's, you know, changing size with a perspective. So I have some stuff in the foreground that's gonna, you know, come through, and then we'll have the cars and stuff flipping over. I don't need this piece here. So I think that'll work. And actually, I'm gonna put this in its own group, and I'll do a quick mask under them so that I don't need to worry about it. Okay, so I think I'm getting somewhere. I'm adding little bits of like spot shading, like these sort of small dark areas, just to kind of separate some of the stones from one another. And then I'm trying to keep some areas more free from detail, so that I can use detail as like a way of focusing in on areas like this, you know. Might need to balance some of it out. Maybe use more like just like cracks and less like big, like maybe merge some shapes, like that. And just use cracks to kind of like separate the elements, but we'll see. Continue on the other side. I mean, I think it's just a matter of continuing to work at it and figure it out. It's just a bunch of broken rubble concrete, so it's meant to be kind of noisy and random. Kind of just dropping back the line weight in the back to give it some like atmospheric perspective, because I don't want this to interfere with my shading later, so I'll just try to keep the background stuff under control. And I mean, if I detail this out, this is going to take forever, so I'm just gonna I'll just try to keep my detail and stuff under control, not get too caught up in it, especially in the background. I need to be careful not to get into texture. So I think Lineart is a form guide, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a textural guide. I don't need to show the texture of the surface, and it can be really difficult not to get carried away when drawing something like rocks or like really rough surfaces. So I'm gonna try to focus on just like indicating just the form and not the textures. But it's easier said than done. Like, okay, and now I guess the last part is to draw. Let me just create a new, let's do, so I'm going to create a perspective grid, just a proper one on top so that I can draw buildings in the background. So how do we do this again? Freeform, star ratio, we'll do 0 or 1%. So that'll create that. Let's do 100 sides. And then we can bring it up to red. And do something like that. So my perspective grid in my sketch, it's right around the center. So I'll do that, throw that in the background, bring it way down. Lots of lines. So when you have lots of lines like this to manage, it's fine to just turn some stuff off and then make sure that your lines are always kind of like the opacity of the layers are like set up in level of importance. So my sketch is the first most important, then my perspective line. So, but I'm setting them both really low. I just need enough information to sketch stuff. So that's gonna be the ground. Lock that. Create a new layer. I try to lock the stuff that I'm not working on so that I don't accidentally delete it. But here we go. So last pass on buildings. Where are my building refs? Here we go. And then we should have this wrapped up. So just one tip about drawing buildings in architecture. It's not particularly difficult, but it does take patience. There's just a lot of repetition, and repetition makes stuff look cooler. So it's just about, taking an element and repeating it through and not getting lazy, because once you get lazy and you start like doing lines that aren't straight or that sort of thing, your architecture starts to fall apart. So just take your time, work through stuff. I'm using 1 point perspective, which is kind of making my life easier than like 2 point perspective, because I can just hold shift and do straight lines. But I don't always do that, because I can also draw some straight lines just freehand if they're shorter. I'm also trying to keep things to scale. Okay, we've almost got one side done. Even though it's just a couple buildings. As they recede further and further back, I can get, I can just indicate more. Have building, maybe we've got sign up here. I'm just gonna hide this stuff for now. Oh, I can also try here. Let me try another technique. So for buildings with more complex facades, I can create a sort of straight pattern and repeat it. So let's say I have like these sort of archways, So I can do a pattern like this, which would be like a 2D pattern, right? And then if I turn my symmetry off, I can duplicate it. Let's do 8, right? To have that for a couple stories maybe. So we'll do 1, 2. So like this. I can even add maybe some detail lines. I'm designing a facade basically. And then I can wrap this. So let's say I have, it's going to be contained that. I can take this and warp it into perspective. So where's this? So let me take this. Maybe I'll bring it, okay, maybe not so many. Here, I'll do 5. So I'll shift this down. Maybe this is that. You can see I'm now shifting it into perspective. Kind of gives me a nice base on which I can work on top of this now for just more complex geometry, right? So I'm still gonna have to give this stuff like thickness, right? So some thickness to the arches. Okay, so we have our buildings laid out. We can add in some final touches, maybe some median lines. And then just kind of resolve this this junction here. So showing some rubble. Adding a few details in here. This is like our tertiary detail pass on the mech guy. So maybe some posters here. I'm not going to go into texturing. So, you know, all these planes might have different kinds of textures, but that's not really important to me as long as I have the main forms. Have some big window panes. let's see, now I can check my reference and add some final little storytelling elements, see if I can find anything. This wall back here is sort of bare. Maybe I'll add another frame. You can really do wonders in architecture with frames and frames, as long as they're nicely proportioned. But here, like, I could have some sort of awning. Here, maybe there's like a little fruit shop or something. Got boxes. Boxes with signs. This is quite common in Montreal where I live. Little fruit and vegetable stands, shops, and they can open up their windows like this to open to the air. So now I'm actually drawing like an interior. Cash. Yeah. So a little something to draw the eye. There we go. Okay, so that's gonna be it for this video. I hope you like the final product. I'm really happy with this. I think there's a lot of some nice elements in here. So let me just merge this down. We'll do a little bit of cleanup. So this will all be one background layer. I could continue, you know, you can always add more stuff and make things more readable and yada yada. But I think I'm gonna stop here. Let's see, okay, so we'll make, because this is purely about line art, I'm gonna make these masks white so that you can see if the whole drawing is reading, and you can see that it's not quite reading. So something I can do is I can either drop the background layer, something like that. I can also add a sort of layer mask to the background layer. Okay, first I'm just gonna double stuff. Make it sort of the same. Okay, so now I can add a layer mask to this, and I can use a gradient to control sort of like atmospheric perspective, right? So I could do something like that, where the further away from the camera it is, the lighter it gets. And I can kind of control this in my layer mask. So if I go here and do a levels on this, a levels adjustment, if I bring like the white all the way down, it's kind of, you know, bringing some of that back. Or I can bring the blacks up, and then maybe bring the whites down. I don't want to lose everything in the background. So what I'm gonna do is actually make these a bit more prominent. So we'll do that, and we'll double this. Okay. So there, I think that in terms of a line drawing has like more than enough information for me to start shading, painting this whole thing. And the nice thing is now that I have my masks for my dude and these sort of foreground elements of the background, and I have all my stuff on one layer in the background. BG. Those taxis. Mac. We have, I'll bring the sketch all the way on top. Just to show the before and after. 34. So we started with this sloppy sketch, and we end with this. Okay, so that's gonna be it for this epic line art tutorial. I hope you guys can take away some valuable info, and we'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.